Hello and welcome to Faith, Fashion, and Fur with Leslie Souza. Today I want to start by reminding you who I am. I am an author, I'm a breast cancer survivor, and I am a blind dog mom. But I also want you to know my purpose in being here. There are a lot of good writers, and I'm very aware of that. But what's different about me is that I bring my writing with a gift of mercy that God has given me and also a passion for people. My heart's desire is to come alongside other people who are hurting and encourage them in and comfort them in ways that God has comforted me. So that's what makes me different. And that's why I'm glad you're here today. If you are going through a hard time or are coming out of a hard time or are going into a hard time, it seems like I'm always in one of those three categories in that transition. I hope that you can find some hope in your situation with a devotion or me sharing a story about my life or just some for fun and fashion tips. So welcome today. I want to well, I already started, but I want to tell a little bit more about the type of cancer that I was diagnosed with before I go on with my cancer story. I was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of breast cancer, HER2 positive. I was estrogen and progesterone negative. Those two cancers, breast cancers, are a little bit more common. In the late 1995, 6, 7, 8, and 9, I believe, there was a targeted drug that was being run through some trials. It was not approved through the FDA until the early 2000s. And before that, when someone was given the diagnosis of HER2 positive breast cancer, they had an estimated 3 years to live. So I'm very grateful for the year that I got my breast cancer, and also for the gentleman who kept at getting the targeted drug approved, and for the lives that he and his approved targeted drug have saved. So with that being said, there also is a movie called Living Proof. It's from 2008, and it's an older movie, but it talks about his journey approving this drug and all that he went through to do so. So what I'd like to continue with now is how when I was going through my breast cancer. I do want to tell you about people that supported me and came alongside me and encouraged me, as I hope to do you. Some people did this with cards, and I started looking forward to going to the mailbox because I usually had a card in it from someone, or sometimes during my breast cancer story, I would go outside. To remind you, this happened to me right before COVID hit. So when COVID did hit, there were not places to go or movies to see, or my friends couldn't come by and pick me up and take me somewhere. So sometimes they would leave like a special just a little thinking of you gift on the front porch, or they would drop off meals and that kind of thing. So those things really became a lifeline for me as far as to the outside world. My lifeline was my relationship with the Lord and the comfort that he brought me. And I think one of my dogs is trying to get in here now. Just one second. Come here. Come on in. You want to come in? Okay. All right, come on. Come on up here. Now that you're in here, you got to say hello. Okay, here he is. Right here. Hello, again, this is Coda. This is not my dog that is blind, but this is his brother, born 1 year after him, but from the same mom and dad, just a different litter. So, okay, I'm gonna let him relax here so I can continue with my story. So, where I want to go from there is that just some things that comforted me while I was, besides, like maybe some flowers or small gifts that I was mentioning. But I also had this group of Christian sisters that were praying for me. But some other things that helped me was that I would put Bible scriptures on tape on to listen to those throughout the day. I would leave K-Love radio station on next to my bed, and a lot of those songs, the lyrics just hit me at the right moment when I needed them most. I think God uses all things to speak to us. So I really did feel sometimes when I heard those songs that God was literally saying those verses in my ear. Another thing that was wonderful for me as I started having my treatments, my son, my youngest son, would come in. Sometimes he'd sit on the side of my bed and read to me, but other times he would cross off my treatments on my calendar, and it just felt like, I was progressing because it did seem like it was going to go on forever. And so that, I could see with sometimes he'd put a heart or a check mark or whatever it may be, but I could just see that, okay, I have those behind me. And it was just something besides having him there, which was super, super comforting. And that was another thing, actually. He had been in the Air Force, and he got out of the Air Force. He enlisted for an additional year so that he could go to London, and he did work for a short while in Germany. But right before COVID hit and right before I received my breast cancer diagnosis, he came home from the Air Force. And so he was there. And I knew that a lot of my friends that were Air Force moms, that their children were no longer, once COVID hit, they were no longer to take their leave or come home or anything. So that would have been another burden on top of me not being able to see my son or for him to come home during my breast cancer. So I was just so glad in that timing that he was there and he could sit on the bed next to me and that we could talk, and he could check off those appointments. So my sisters were another thing. They visited me often. One of my sisters was wonderful about, she gave me some sponge baths and did my laundry, and we would share at the end of the day what we were grateful for. So I looked forward to those moments. My other sister, she would bring me coffee. She would put stick-on nails on my fingernails. Just those kind of things that just, make you feel a little more human and a little bit better. And then I kept walking, and I would take my Bible verses with me. I found ones that, they're all promises to us from God. And I mean, some are stories, but there are lessons within those stories for us. And so I found Bible verses that I just clung so tightly onto, and I would use them in so many different ways during my walks. Sometimes I'd read them, I'd try to memorize them, but I'd also claim them. I would thank God for them. I would thank God like they had already come true for me in advance. I would just meditate on them in different ways. And I actually have a list of those Bible verses if that's something you're interested in or would like to have. That's also in my book, my devotional book, Sit Still, in the middle of the book after my breast cancer story. So so a couple other things that happened, your hair is going to fall out and you think you're prepared for it, but you can know it's going to happen, but it's just something you're never prepared for. And I don't know, I think maybe a man would even feel the same way, but I was thinking, my older son, he had told me, he said, Mom, let's just shave off your hair, but and a lot of people do that, and it's great. I think there are some benefits to that instead of just like little strands starting to fall out, or they're on your pillowcase when you wake up in the morning, or that first strand when you're in the shower. It was really not a strand. It's usually like was a chunk. And when that first happened, that first day it happened, even though I knew it was going to happen, oh, I cried and I called my older son. And that's when he was telling me, let's, shave your head or whatever. And I never ended up doing that. But what I did do was I started brushing because my head started like, it was sore, it was tender. And so I got this little brush and I just started, brushing through my hair. And I started taking that hair, and I had birds everywhere around my house. And I just started putting the hair up in as high in the trees as I possibly could, in hopes that a bird would take that hair and make a nest out of it. Because I don't know, something comforted me about thinking of just some little birdies being in one of my curls up in a tree, So and it being used for a good purpose, for a nest. But I also tried to think about, and I was telling you all these things so that maybe you can think in the middle of what you're going through, you can think about how to get the it's not always easy to do, but not to think solely of yourself, but to think of how you can help other people, even though you're in the midst of your own trial, like what you can do to concentrate on others instead of concentrating on yourself. And like I said, it's not easy, but I started asking the Lord each morning, how can I bless somebody else this morning? And I started finding ways. And one thing I did was I saw a neighbor. She had her mother was in a wheelchair like my mom used to be. And I saw her pushing her mom down the street. And so I went and got one of my books, my poetry books that I had written after my mom passed away. It is called Let the Sunshine In, but it was poems of my mother's that I found after she passed away. And I put those together. I think she was putting those together herself to put them in another poetry book. She had 3 poetry books published before she died. And so what I did was I did put these into a book for her, but I answered the poems with my own, just in honor and in memory of her, for my family and friends. So I took one of those books down the street to that lady. And I remember a long time later, I was walking around the neighborhood and I heard someone call from their upstairs window and said, "Hey, are you the lady who gave me that book? I've been reading it to my mom every day and it's beautiful." And so I tried to bless her, but in the end, I actually ended up getting blessed myself that day on my walk when she called out to me from her upstairs window. So another thing I started doing, I had read a really touching story about an older man. He always wore yellow socks. And if I'm remembering correctly, his after he died, his granddaughter started collecting yellow socks in memory of him, because he would always say, you can't be sad when you wear yellow socks. So what I started doing was getting these really nice yellow socks, men and women's, and when I would go into the infusion center to have my treatment, I started passing those out with the story of this man. Sometimes I would pass it out with my own testimony. People were funny. They wanted the socks, but sometimes they would think, like, they would ask me like how much they were, like I was trying to sell them. But I would tell them, no, they're free. They're just something I want to give you to encourage you today as you're having treatment, because I'm on my way to having mine. So I'm going to end there today. And because our 15 minutes is almost up, I'm thinking maybe I'll give you a few of those verses that I was talking about. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. That's Philippians 4:13. So I might say something like, Lord, thank you for giving me the strength in Philippians 4:13. Another one, for I am the Lord your God, who takes hold of your right hand and says to you, Do not fear, I will help you. That's Isaiah 41:13. And I might say that like, thank you, Lord, for calming my fears and helping me. See you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.